John Lennon, when the spotlight became a death trap. The night of December 8, 1980, in New York City, was a knife edge of cold, but nothing compared to the icy breath of death stalking John Lennon. When the gunshots tore through the silence in front of the Dakota building, the world collectively held its breath. For bullets ripped apart not just a man's body, but the very notion of safety for cultural icons. I often ask myself, did the blinding glare of his own fame transform Lennon into a target? In a society that worships its idols with a terrifying blindness, was the ultimate price of greatness his very life? Looking back at John Lennon's journey, I see a heartbreaking paradox. The man who dedicated his life to singing of peace died by violence. The artist who yearned to live as an ordinary man was murdered simply for being too famous. Perhaps even I, born years after Lennon's passing, cannot fully grasp the shock that rippled across the globe that day. Yet, every time I hear Imagine, a shiver still runs down my spine. Knowing that voice was permanently silenced by a man who appointed himself judge of his idol's supposed hypocrisy. Mark David Chapman was more than just a killer. He was the chilling embodiment of an idolatry culture twisted into something profoundly sick. In Chapman's deranged eyes, Lennon was no longer flesh and blood, but merely a symbol that needed to be destroyed. A cold dread washes over me when I read his journal entries, where he scribbled about Lennon as a traitor deserving of punishment. What twisted logic compelled a man, once a volunteer for charitable causes, to coldly pull the trigger on another man walking home to his wife and child? In a bitter twist of fate, the very day Lennon found domestic happiness after years grappling with fame was the day destiny dealt its final blow. His album Double Fantasy had just been released, a declaration of artistic rebirth. He had escaped his creative crisis, found peace alongside Yoko Ono and their son, Sean. But cruel irony intervened. Just as Lennon finally got to live like an ordinary man, his fame dragged him back into the deadly vortex. Lennon's assassination wasn't merely the story of a death. It was a chilling siren call about the toxic dance between artist and audience. When we elevate artists to gods, do we not strip them of their right to simply be human? When we demand perfection from our idols, are we not unwittingly creating more Chapmans, men ready to punish their heroes for not being as flawless as they imagined? 43 years have vanished into the ether, but the narrative of John Lennon's demise continues to haunt me. It's not just one man's tragedy. It's the tragedy of an entire popular culture that elevates its idols to altars, only to then wish to cast them down. Perhaps the greatest lesson gleaned from this grim case file is this: behind every idol lies a fragile human being, and no one deserves to pay with their life simply for being too brilliant. The road from Liverpool to the Dakota, the journey of a legend. John Winston Lennon entered this world on October 9, 1940. Amidst the bombing raids of World War II in Liverpool, a harsh, yet musically vibrant, port city. Orphaned by his father early, abandoned by his mother, and then losing her entirely at 17. Lennon grew up with a loneliness etched into his very being. It was at the Liverpool College of Art that this eccentric young man, with his distinctive round spectacles, first met Paul McCartney. From that fateful encounter, music history was irrevocably rewritten. By the 1960s, the Beatles had exploded into a global phenomenon. But unlike the good boy image the band carefully cultivated, Lennon was always the one to break free. He penned Help as a desperate cry for deliverance from fame, and crafted Strawberry Fields Forever with an unsettling existential confusion. When the Beatles disbanded in 1970, it marked a new beginning for Lennon, the artist who dared to sing about politics, peace, and his own raw fears. In 1975, he made the audacious decision to step away from the spotlight, embracing the role of househusband for his young son, Sean. Yet, as if fate itself delighted in cruel irony, Just as he found balance with his 1980 album Double Fantasy, death came knocking. Perhaps Lennon never truly escaped the curse of celebrity, the very thing he once called the monster that devours the soul. Mark David Chapman, the assassin with the face of a failure. If Lennon was the emblem of soaring success, then Mark David Chapman, born in 1955, was the embodiment of American societal failure. Hailing from a seemingly middle-class family in Texas, Chapman had a record as a diligent security guard, even working for a charitable organization. But beneath that veneer of normalcy lurked a deeply disturbed mind. In 1979, Chapman suffered a profound shock when his girlfriend rejected him. He burned through his savings to travel to Hawaii, where he lived in his car, nursing suicidal ideations. Yet, instead of ending his own life, his obsession shifted to The Catcher in the Rye and, chillingly, to John Lennon. In his mind, a deranged notion took root: killing Lennon would transform him into a real Holden Caulfield, a hero eradicating hypocrisy. The terrifying truth was that no one recognized the impending danger. Chapman's wife later recalled, "He just said he was tracking John Lennon. I thought it was normal fandom." Even the gun store clerk in Hawaii harbored no suspicion when Chapman purchased the .38 Special, the very weapon that would forever alter the course of music history. For shots that shook the world, recreating the fateful moment. The night of December 8, 1980, in New York City, was a brutal, bone-chilling affair. The temperature dipped below 0 degrees Celsius, and every breath turned to a ghostly mist in the air. But that freezing cold was a pale imitation of the chilling breath of death that stalked John Lennon from behind. Mark David Chapman, with a blank face and haunted eyes, had stood motionless for hours in front of the stately Dakota Building, a fortress of brick and stone in the heart of Manhattan. His hand, icy and trembling with a grim resolve, clutched a .38 Special in his oversized coat pocket. A meticulous plan, hatched and honed in his sick mind, had been executed with a cold precision by the gun in Hawaii to avoid suspicion, fly to New York, and track Lennon's movements for 3 straight days, from early mornings to late nights, memorizing every minor habit of the idol he had transformed into a target. It was all a prelude to this one fateful moment, the moment he believed would transform him from an insignificant nobody into an immortal figure in history. 10:49 p.m., the sleek, white limousine glided to a stop in front of the Dakota's entrance. Inside were Lennon and his wife, just back from a productive session at the record plant studio. The air in the car likely still hummed with the echoes of recorded music, the residue of creative ideas flowing freely. Yoko Ono, with her elegant and slightly hurried gait, stepped out first, her long black hair blowing in the bitter wind, and walked directly toward the building's entrance. John Lennon followed her slowly, his posture slightly stooped. A demo tape of Yoko's newest song, Walking on Thin Ice, still in his hand. That song, with its grim and prophetic title, seemed to foreshadow the very horror that was about to unfold. 10:50 p.m. Time seemed to stand still. From the deepening shadows of the Dakota's arched entryway, Chapman emerged. His voice, hoarse and trembling with a mix of nervous excitement and deranged fervor, called out, "Mr. Lennon?" Lennon, with the ingrained reflex of a celebrity hailed by a fan, turned around. In that fleeting, fragile instant, a fraction of a second, the two men looked directly into each other's eyes. I can't help but wonder what Lennon saw in the eyes of his assassin. Did he recognize the familiar face of the man who had asked for his autograph that afternoon, the one who had waited patiently, seemingly with a fan's admiration? But there was no time for any thought to surface, no warning, no chance for a reaction. Chapman, with both hands locked on the gun, raised it in a professional police stance and pulled the trigger. The first shot, a sharp, deafening report, tore through the quiet night air. The fatal bullet ripped through Lennon's left shoulder, staggering him, causing his body to lose balance and lurch forward. The next 3 shots, fired in rapid succession, struck his back at terrifyingly close range, a distance close enough for each bullet to shred his lungs and his aorta. Fresh, dark red blood erupted in a spray, soaking his coat and staining the frozen puddle on the sidewalk, creating a grotesque crimson smear under the dim streetlights. I believe that image haunted every single person who witnessed that moment for the rest of their lives. "I've been shot," Lennon whispered weakly to Jose Perdomo, the Dakota's doorman, who rushed to his side in a state of utter panic. Blood gushed from his mouth with each weak breath. Those were the last words of a symbol of peace. A man who had used music to heal the wounds of millions of hearts. Meanwhile, Chapman, the perpetrator, took a terrifying step back. With a shocking calmness, he took off his coat, placed the gun on the hood of a car, and sat down on the curb, opening his copy of The Catcher in the Rye to read. He waited silently for the police to arrive. As if he had just completed some high-minded mission, a play for which he had meticulously written the script and was now simply waiting for the final applause. Chapman's chilling composure in that moment revealed the extent of his mental disturbance and his insane obsession. He had no intention of running. For him, being captured was the reward, the validation for the great act he had just committed. 10:52 p.m., just 2 minutes after the gunshots, an ambulance arrived. Dr. Stephen Lynn from Roosevelt Hospital was on the scene and tried desperately to perform CPR on Lennon in the back of the ambulance. I can only imagine the chaotic, desperate scene. The wailing sirens piercing the night, the ambulance lights flashing furiously, and the futile attempts to cling to the life of a dying man. But the wounds were too severe, too vicious. Too much blood had been lost, too fast. The heart of a legend, already silenced, could not be restarted. 11:07 p.m., Lennon was rushed to the hospital's emergency room, but all efforts were in vain. 11:15 p.m., Dr. David Haller officially pronounced him dead. The cause was determined with cold, clinical finality, massive blood loss from penetrating arterial wounds. It was a tragic, brutal end to a brilliant life. A horrifying contradiction. While Roosevelt Hospital was plunged into chaos, filled with Yoko Ono's heartbreaking sobs and the stunned disbelief of the medical staff, Mark David Chapman calmly gave his statement to the police at the scene. His voice held no remorse, only a strange sense of pride. "I just killed John Lennon." He was a hypocrite. That sentence, so cold and void of emotion, was carved into the annals of crime, a chilling confession from a delusional man with a twisted sense of justice. In his pocket, they found gruesome evidence that painted a picture of a mind poisoned by delusion. An old newspaper with an interview of John Lennon titled "I Live as an Invisible Man," which Chapman seemingly used as proof of Lennon's hypocrisy. He couldn't accept that a famous person would want to live a life of anonymity, while he himself craved fame with an insane desperation. A marked-up copy of Lennon's song Imagine, filled with Chapman's angry, hateful scribbles. A song about peace and hope had become the target of blind hatred. It was a painful, gut-wrenching contradiction. His personal notebook, overflowing with haunting phrases like "John Lennon must die for selling out his ideals" and "he is a devil in an angel's disguise." Those scribbled lines were not just evidence. They were a window into a soul completely warped by jealousy and the fantasy of having the power to judge. The most haunting detail, the one that sends a shiver down my spine whenever I think of this case, is the cruel and impossible coincidence, as if destiny itself had orchestrated the event with a sadistic hand. Chapman shot Lennon in the very spot where he would often stop to sign autographs for his fans, an act of pure trust and kindness. That trust, that friendliness, is what made Lennon an easy target. The final bullet, the one that stole Lennon's life, pierced his left lung, the same spot where he had been injured in a terrifying car accident in 1966. Was it some cruel cosmic joke? A bit of fate's dark humor that an old wound, seemingly healed, was completed by an assassin's bullet? The album double fantasy that Chapman carried that afternoon. The very album Lennon had just autographed for him, or the inscription, "Happy Christmas," from John and Yoko. It was a loving farewell, a wish for the future. But no one knew it would be the last goodbye from an icon to the world. The stark contrast between that message of happiness and his tragic death creates an unforgettable tragedy. The legacy of a crime. The assassination of John Lennon wasn't just the tragic end of a life. It was a seismic event that forever changed how society viewed fame and the relationship between artists and the public. It left an indelible scar on the history of pop culture. A chilling wake-up call that echoes even today. Artists worldwide, from Paul McCartney, Lennon's old friend and writing partner, to Elton John, David Bowie, and countless others, were forced to confront a grim reality: the spotlight comes with a dangerous shadow. They were compelled to hire round-the-clock bodyguards, living in a state of heightened alert. Because Lennon's death proved that even the most beloved icons were not safe from fanaticism. The Dakota Building ceased being just an iconic New York landmark. It became a tragic pilgrimage site, where fans from all over the world gathered to remember Lennon. They painted strawberries and the words "Strawberry Fields Forever" on the sidewalk, left flowers, and lit candles, transforming the spot into a spontaneous memorial, a living testament to the world's undying love for him, but also a never-ending reminder of the tragedy that took place there. Mark David Chapman was sentenced to life in prison and remains at the infamous Attica Correctional Facility. He has been denied parole multiple times. Yet, what is most terrifying and difficult to comprehend is that to this day, he still receives thousands of letters from fans, individuals who believe in his twisted logic, who see him as a hero who dared to stand against hypocrisy. This isn't just proof of the existence of disturbed minds in society, it shows that fame, even when tied to an atrocious crime, can still transform a killer into a dark legend in the eyes of some, a frightening truth we cannot ignore. Looking back, I feel an endless, bitter sorrow when I recall John Lennon's own grim prophecy. He wrote in his personal diary in 1979, just 1 year before his murder, "I'm afraid of fanatics. They love you so much they want to kill you." That fateful night, destiny proved him right in the most painful and tragic way imaginable. His prophecy was not just the premonition of a sensitive artist, it was a stark warning about the dark side of celebrity. About the inherent danger when a person is idolized to the point of losing their humanity, and when admiration morphs into a deranged obsession that can lead to the most devastating of ends. Lennon's death wasn't just a death, it was a scream of a warning to all of humanity about the fragile line between admiration and fanaticism, between love and hate. The killer and his meaningless pleas. The crime scene, when the killer waited for capture. The New York night was a blade of ice cutting through flesh. The jarring echo of 4 gunshots still reverberating in the air, tearing through the quiet darkness and shattering the hearts of millions yet to learn the truth. After coldly pulling the trigger, unloading those death-dealing bullets into John Lennon's back, Mark David Chapman made no attempt to flee, no move to vanish into the shadows. Instead, with a chillingly detached expression, as if he'd merely completed a trivial errand, he stripped off his heavy coat. Horrifyingly, he placed the fateful weapon, the .38 Special, onto the hood of the gleaming limousine parked directly in front of the Dakota, a place that, just minutes before, had been a haven of peace, now transformed into the stage of a tragedy. Then, he calmly sat down on the frigid pavement, amidst the victims' pooling blood. While John Lennon, a global music legend, lay writhing in his own lifeblood, gasping his last breaths. Chapman leisurely flipped through his beloved copy of The Catcher in the Rye, as if he had just accomplished some sacred mission. A task preordained by a higher power that only he could comprehend. New York Police Department officers, responding with astonishing speed, arrived mere minutes after the frantic 911 call. Initially, they mistook the scene for a routine altercation, a minor incident common in a sprawling metropolis like New York. But when the patrol car headlights cut through the darkness and illuminated John Lennon lying motionless in a spreading crimson stain on the cold snow, all confusion evaporated. An officer approached Chapman, who remained seated, immobile and placid. "I knew you'd come. I just shot John Lennon," Chapman stated in an even, emotionless tone. As if announcing a perfectly reasonable act, perhaps even one worthy of praise. I still wonder what thoughts raced through the minds of those officers in that moment. Horror? Disbelief? Or perhaps an overwhelming sense of disgust at the killer's chilling indifference? He was immediately apprehended, handcuffed, and processed right there on the spot. All procedures were swift, professional. But even as he was led to the police car, Chapman refused to stay silent. He turned his head, his eyes gleaming with a mad, sick euphoria, staring at the growing crowd. Their faces a mixture of shock and fear. He yelled loudly, a scream that tore through the night, he was a hypocrite. The Catcher in the Rye will explain everything. That shout wasn't just a deranged man's self-justification, it was a cold declaration of a twisted ideology, a brazen challenge hurled at a world he believed was steeped in falsehood. The days that followed, the assassin and his courtroom charade. Chapman was swiftly taken to police headquarters for interrogation. He was assigned a defense attorney as per legal requirement. Throughout the initial questioning, he repeatedly invoked the Catcher in the Rye, identifying himself as the real-life Holden Caulfield, an antisocial character who despises phoniness in the novel that had so obsessed him. He unequivocally declared that he had been sent by God to exterminate the phony, specifically John Lennon, whom he viewed as the embodiment of decay, of selling out peace ideals for money and fame. These statements initially bewildered the authorities, unable to grasp the true motive behind such a horrific crime, or whether he was simply a deranged madman. But strangely, just days after the truth of John Lennon's death sent shockwaves across the globe, as millions worldwide reeled in pain and disbelief, Chapman's demeanor underwent a startling transformation. He began to feign remorse, a meticulously orchestrated charade, perhaps at the direction of his lawyer or simply an instinct for self-preservation. I can't help but feel revulsion at this shift. A change too abrupt to be genuine. At his trial in 1981, Chapman, who had once brazenly declared, "I have no regrets about what I did," now appeared utterly changed. He wept uncontrollably, tears streaming down his face, and offered apologies to Lennon's family. He claimed he just wanted to be famous, that his actions were a grave mistake born of selfishness and a blind craving for notoriety. He even wrote a letter to Yoko Ono, Lennon's widow, begging for her forgiveness. But these words, those tears, to me, and likely to many others, did not stem from true contrition, but were merely a desperate attempt, a pathetic act to reduce his sentence, to escape the harshest judgment of the law. Could a cold-blooded killer truly change so quickly? It's simply too hard to believe. I was an idiot. I did it to become somebody, Chapman told the judge. This statement, if truly heartfelt, only further revealed the shallow and sick nature of his motivation. He was willing to steal the life of an icon just to be recognized. But Judge Edward J. Greenfield, a seasoned jurist, was not fooled by this cheap performance. He saw through the killer's true nature. Judge Greenfield sentenced Chapman to 20 years to life in prison, emphasizing that this was one of the most horrific assassinations in New York history. That sentence was the necessary justice for the heinous crime he had committed. parole hearings and the truth behind the mask. For over 40 long years confined within the walls of the notorious Attica Correctional Facility, one of America's most maximum security prisons, Mark D. Avid Chapman has relentlessly filed for parole. He has stood before the parole board a total of 6 times, most recently in 2022, with the same tired script. Each time, he has penned lengthy, flowery letters, asserting his transformation, claiming to have become a devout Christian, to have found God's light, and to truly repent for his sins. He even boasts about helping other inmates, as if this were proof of his rehabilitation. I ask myself, is there a single flicker of genuine remorse in his soul, or is it all just another act for freedom? But those who have had direct contact with him in prison, the guards, the staff, other inmates, tell a completely different story, one far more stark and chilling. A former Attica guard, who supervised Chapman for many years, revealed in an interview, Chapman isn't remorseful. He just wants attention. That statement hit like a cold splash of water on any hope of the killer's repentance. He often brags about being the man who killed John Lennon, the former guard added. This detail truly fills me with utter disgust. A killer who takes pride in his victim's death, who parades it as a trophy. Even more heartbreaking, he has received numerous letters from fanatics. Individuals who consider him a hero, someone who dared to act on a twisted ideal. This once again proves that obsession and hatred can spread like a disease, transforming evil into a distorted form of idolatry in the minds of a small segment of society. Yoko Ono, John Lennon's widow, who has lived with the agonizing pain of losing her husband for over 4 decades, has dedicated her life to fighting against Chapman's release. In a rare and emotional interview, she stated unequivocally, "I will never forgive him. His apologies are just a show." Those words, uttered by someone who has endured unimaginable suffering, carry the weight of truth and unending grief. They reveal that, for the victim and their family, the scar Chapman inflicted is beyond healing. And no amount of feigned remorse can erase the crime that was defined by blood and anguish. The story of Mark David Chapman serves as a stark reminder that, sometimes, repentance is merely a veil for a soul forever corrupted by delusion and the craving for power, even power defined by crime. John Lennon, Mark David Chapman, and the tale of heroes built on ruins. 43 years have vanished since that fateful night in New York. Yet the assassination of John Lennon continues to haunt humanity, an unhealing wound in the fabric of popular culture. For me, it wasn't merely the sudden demise of a legendary rock star. It was the painful collapse of a profound belief, the conviction that art could shield artists from violence, that the love from an audience was always pure and unconditional. And that lost souls like Mark David Chapman were rare exceptions, easily isolated by society. The truth, as we've agonizingly come to realize through every diary entry, every confession, and every hollow apology, is far more complex and far more grim. Chapman has cemented his place as the classic archetype, indeed a horrifying symbol, of the idol killer, a phenomenon the 21st century would witness repeatedly. From the wrongful death of young singer Christina Grimmie in the arms of a deranged fan to the assassination of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe during a campaign speech. What made Chapman different, and what truly haunts me, was his motive. He didn't kill for money, for political gain, or even from simple personal hatred. He killed to exist, to etch his name into history in the most tragic way imaginable. In his warped world, tying himself to the death of a great legend like John Lennon was the only path to escape anonymity, to transform himself from a pathetic failure into someone. This leaves me with a gnawing question, a persistent ache: did the very culture of excessive celebrity worship, elevating individuals to godlike status on pedestals, inadvertently create men like Chapman? when society elevates fame and wealth as the ultimate measures of human worth? Are we unconsciously encouraging lost souls to seek extreme, horrific acts for recognition? But the greatest tragedy, in my view, doesn't lie with Chapman's sickness, but with the world's reaction and its reception of the crime. Immediately after Lennon's assassination, a disturbing wave of copycat acts and attacks on celebrities emerged. Just a year later, in 1981, a man plotted to assassinate Paul McCartney, Lennon's old friend and musical partner, a terrifying continuation of the tragedy. By 1995, President Bill Clinton narrowly escaped becoming another victim of a fanatic who believed he was a traitor. Clearly, Lennon's death taught us no profound lesson, or if it did, we failed to learn it. Or perhaps we simply chose to ignore it. The entertainment industry continued its nonchalance toward rigorous artist security, often viewing it as an unnecessary expense. The media, in its relentless pursuit of sensational stories, reported in chilling detail on the lives and psychologies of the killers, inadvertently turning them into stars in a different, perverse way. Known to millions. And the public, sadly, continues to foster a toxic love for celebrities, a love where the line between genuine admiration and delusional obsession is dangerously thin, easily blurred. Yet, conversely, and with a profound irony, John Lennon's legacy lives on in ways Chapman could never have foreseen, and certainly could not destroy. As he sits in his cold cell in Attica, gnawing on regret and yearning for freedom, immortal songs like Imagine still resonate through peace rallies, at charity concerts, and in every corner of this planet. As he dreams of one day being released to live a normal life, Lennon's image, with his iconic round glasses, has become an enduring symbol on t-shirts, vast murals, and even public statues erected worldwide. Perhaps this is the most just, and ironically, the sweetest, punishment for Chapman. He failed miserably in erasing Lennon from humanity's memory. Instead, he only made the world love Lennon more, cherish his legacy more deeply, and remember the tragedy as an unceasing reminder of the value of peace and love. In a letter from prison in 2020, Chapman penned lines filled with apparent remorse. "I wish I had never done it. But for me, this regret comes too late, and carries a sickening selfishness. It's not for John Lennon. Not for the immense pain he inflicted on Yoko Ono and Sean Lennon, but for himself, an aging man begging for pity, grasping for a sliver of hope for his incarcerated life." Meanwhile, in Strawberry Fields, Lennon's memorial garden in Central Park, New York, people still place flowers, still sing songs like "Give Peace a Chance Every Day," as an affirmation of life, hope, and peace. That contrast speaks volumes. The killer will forever be cursed, imprisoned in the shadow of his crime, while his victim, John Lennon, has become immortal, an eternal star in the firmament of music and peace. Perhaps the ultimate and most profound lesson from this case lies in a line Lennon himself wrote in 1970, "Instant karma's gonna get you." Chapman sought to become a legend by destroying one, but he remains merely a haunted phantom in his own story. John Lennon, who never aspired to be a saint, only yearned to live and create, truly became a legend, an eternal symbol of peace, love, and music. That is fate's sweetest revenge, a grim justice for the one who sowed violence. The case of John Lennon starkly reminds me of a similar tragedy born from fanaticism and celebrity obsession, the assassination of Rebecca Schaeffer. She was a talented young actress, murdered by a stalker in 1989. Schaeffer's death dramatically changed California law regarding harassment and stalking. Does tragedy always have to strike? Must blood always be spilled before we truly grasp the danger of unhinged fanaticism? And when will we finally learn how to admire our idols in a healthy way, rather than transforming them into targets for twisted delusions?